Very proud of him in Buffalo. He's a great, innovative, political activist, artist. He's been through a lot of shit, and he represents us.
Okay, so everyone can hear me okay? The sound's all right in here? I don't need the microphone? Oh, good, because the microphone makes everything sound terrible. And if you can hear everything in the camera okay. Sound check? Okay. All right, so I thought today, and first let me say how brave you are. Like, during lunch, you don't even stop for lunch. You come and hear more. I mean, that's like dedication. Wow. I thought today I'd talk a little bit about expression management. I know we have a lot of cultural activists here at this conference, as well as direct action activists. And they all seem to really have their pitfalls these days. And over the past 20 years or so, I think I've come to meet almost all of the disciplinary agencies that are called upon when the management of our expression starts breaking down, right? When you start behaving in some kind of way that begins to disrupt the smooth spaces of the status quo. And over the years, like I said, I think we've come across all of them. Everything from high-level religious theocrats to the Joint Terrorism Task Force. We've met them all at one time or another. So I just thought I'd kind of look at a couple of projects that we've done and see what it is that provokes this kind of response. Because, it's not like we're doing something incredibly outrageous in the grand majority of times. And every time, we're not even stepping over that line of legality. So, he said, it's not like you have to do anything too extreme. And to kind of illustrate my point, this is kind of a smaller part of what was a very large project called the Winnebago Project, in which we just drove around in the Winnebago and we had various kinds of works that we do, performances, slideshows, videos, etc. I'm not going to talk about all of that, just this one performance that we like to do at places where there seem to be a lot of commodity exchange, right? Where there's good cash flow going on. And this, where we're looking at here, is Daytona Beach. Some of you may recognize it, those of you that are Florida folks. And what we wanted to show was this place that seemed like some kind of space of autonomy. At least that's how I think most of the people there in that public space would think about it. Really, not so much, right? That actually, it was a fairly well-militarized place. And it could seem invisible because, you could see the cars on the beach, people are drag racing up and down the beach, and they're jumping off cranes with bungee cords, and girls are going wild. And it can give the idea that maybe it's some kind of autonomous zone. But in actuality, one does not have to cross the behavior line in any kind of radical way to get a very different kind of response. As long as you're buying beer, or you're paying to jump off that crane with a bungee cord, or paying your money to get on the beach, everything is okay. But you can see here our performance artist is out of the way. He's not blocking the free flow of traffic in any way. And what he's doing is he's putting together a Hot Wheels track. Some of you may remember Hot Wheels from your childhood. I don't know if they have them anymore. We had to go to like a Salvation Army to find our Hot Wheels track. And he had a little Winnebago that he would push around, and he has his boom box, and there was kind of a sound montage we did of car crashes and children saying, when are we going to get there? And we loaded it a little bit, and put a Burger King crown on his head. So he looks a little strange, and he's doing a deviant act that does not have to do in any way with the commerce of that space. In this case, we have a child playing, or an adult playing with child toys. So that's all he's doing. He's not bothering anybody. Like I said, he's not in the way of anything. Every time we did this, within 2 to 3 minutes, the police would arrive. And there they are, right? And this is what we're trying to explain. If people kind of would get it, they would be looking at going, this guy's about to be arrested for playing with a toy. So it's a strange thing, and it was a very instructive piece, because and the cops were the best performers for us, because they would show up, and right there, the two cops that are there, they're talking about what they're going to arrest them for. They're trying to decide whether they should use some kind of vagrancy law or a public nuisance law, which would be the better one to take them in on. Right? Now, we stop before actually getting arrested because the point's been made. And I think everyone there not only understands that someone's getting arrested for playing with a toy, right? But that there are laws on the books that any of us can be arrested at any time, right? And once you enter into the realm of public space and take just the slightest step in the deviance, nothing illegal, and I mean modest, the police will be there to take you to jail, right? And so it was an eye-opening experience for us as well, though we knew it theoretically when we actually went out and did it, and it worked exactly the way the theory said it. That was a little surprising in itself, and it's something that stuck with us over the course of the career, is that if you're going to go out and in some way actually use your right to free speech in a minoritarian way, however that might be, politically, whatever, expect pushback. And, you know, we've definitely gotten our share of it. So, now, when you do something that is a little harsher, like this, contestational biology, what we wanted to talk about here was what we believe to be a very underutilized potential activist tool, and that is using new life science techniques, materials, processes, right? Most of the time it's stuff that we are protesting against, but like any other tool, it can be made to do things other than what it was originally designed for. And we thought, well, we need to start demonstrating this a little bit, right? That there are ways, if we just think about it in a different manner, that we could use the sciences to our own advantage, right? Instead of just giving them over to the corporations and to the military, right? Which is, unfortunately, they pretty much almost have a monopoly on it, right? Resistance culture has only made the slightest inroads into this huge area of exploration, and you know, what is a really revolutionary technology in media that is emerging. And you know, we're at best users, and usually not that. We just buy the products that are created, right? It's something far worse than with computers, right? The good thing about them is they have to give us computers. So they're part of our everyday life, we know how to use them, and we can make them do things they're not designed really to do. But with this stuff, it's completely alien, right? No one except for me, maybe, has a lab in their home, right? And, you know, this is kind of our own kind of expression management right here. From us managing ourselves and going, I don't know if I have a lab in my home. That can, you know, lead to some pretty difficult questions. And indeed it can. I can testify to that. But what we were doing here was again, you know, to try and demystify what's going on with a lot of this, but also to show that we could use our knowledge in a radical way, right? That it could be framed within resistant culture. So our idea was, in this case, was really to provoke Monsanto, right? And I'm sure in this room there is a general hatred of, I mean, if this company actually, you know, because like corporations have the rights of individuals, if they actually had to be accountable like individuals, that they would be before a firing squad in international court, right? So it's like, it's not something that we're really to have any mercy on. And it was fortunate because we got invited to do this project by the Corcoran Museum. And the good thing about museums and doing projects with them is it gives you great institutional cover, right? That you really have some public leverage in the media because the Corcoran, being this incredibly well-respected Washington, D.C. museum, it's hard to attack it, right? Because it really has the legitimacy and the perception that this is an institution that does public good. So it's hard to get after it. So we could take advantage of that legitimacy. And we basically announced to the newspapers that we were going to reverse engineer Monsanto's most profitable product. In this case, it's Roundup Ready line. And that's not even their worst project. We just picked it because it was the most profitable one, right? Because, you know, if you rattle the cars and profit, that's usually how you get the best reception. And the theory we were putting forward was that, in this case, that what they were selling as a trait of adaptability, in other words, by injecting a bacteria gene into this plant, that it had better herbicidal resistance and complete resistance to their special Roundup Ready herbicide. That we could take that trait of adaptability and make it a trait of susceptibility. That we could find the right biochemical reaction that would target the enzymes produced by that introduced gene, right? And basically short-circuit the plant. So that was the idea we went after. Now, unfortunately, we're not scientists. That would really be quite a research initiative. You know, we had the idea, right? We had the theoretical frame. But the fortunate thing is, when I went to college, I did learn how to do research. And we know who did have the answer. Because once Monsanto patented that plant, they had to make public all of their research on the plant. And we just went right into their database and just said enzyme inhibitors for Roundup Ready. And big list. So we've got targeting, so we have the way to target it. And we found one, pyridoxal 5-phosphate, which when mixed with the herbicide and sunlight causes a photocombustion in the plant that basically blows out the cells. So, and you know, we thank Monsanto for this. And so, you know, we said, here's what we're going to do, that we're using Monsanto's own research to do it. And here's going to be this public display, and we had, you know, just to help us out with that little bit more legitimacy, we worked with the students from the Corcoran School of Art that they keep in the basement. Most of the people don't see it. But down in the basement, there are students working away. And they agreed to help us in this kind of long-term testing. We had our control groups and experimental groups. That part of science we could do. We knew how to structure an experiment as well. And off we went. And I don't know, we got, I say 10 days or so into the project, and man, all of a sudden, like an army of angry ants, lawyers come piling into this gallery. I mean, it must have been a dozen of them. And they're taking pictures of everything and writing stuff down and going through the website and waving cease and desist papers around. It was pretty funny. And the Corcoran people were really good. They said, well, we're not stopping them. This is an art project. This is another great thing when you can use art. This is an art project. I always like that. You know, you can run for cover behind art. This is art. You can't censor it. Right? And they're like, oh, but you have to. You can't be doing this. But we weren't breaking the law in any way. We hadn't done anything. The only thing that they could go to is to say, well, you're using Roundup seeds and you're not licensed to do it. I was, well, you can sue us for that, because I don't know, we were using maybe $10 worth of seeds, right? And it would have been an interesting case. I was almost hoping that they would sue us or sue the Corcoran or something, because when we get the seeds, we went out, Claire Pentegas, who worked with us on this project, she lives in Chicago, so she was kind of near the Midwestern region where there's the seed banks, right, where the product is sold. So she goes out to the seed store and says, you know, I'd like to get some Roundup Ready seeds. And the person there says, well, I can't sell them to you because you're not licensed. He goes, but you know, it's the end of the season and bags break open and I throw them in the dumpster, wink, wink. And if you're going to go check out there, I mean, I'm not going to say anything. So she goes out and dumpster dives out these things, which we always wanted to wonder, because, you know, once it's been thrown away like that, and it's no longer anybody's property, we should be able to take them. Yet at the same time, it is a registered trademark that you have to license. So I don't know how that would have been decided. It could have been a very interesting case. But that's how we got it. And in the end, we did get to go through this, and like I said, and hopefully demonstrate in a way that science can be used in a way that is not necessarily of great benefit to the military or to the corporate world, right? That there's a lot of tools there, and then the amazing thing is the tools are easy to use, and they've been kitted. I mean, I found this out. I went to the one of the labs for the Human Genome Project when that was back when that was going on, and I'm walking around the lab, and and I'm familiar with most of the stuff, and I see this piece of equipment. I don't know what it is, and there is, at least what I think as a scientist, he had a white lab coat on and gloves, working away, working his pipette, doing the research. And so I go up to him and I say, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you, but could you tell me what this piece of equipment does?" And he said, "I don't have a clue. I'm a work study student from political science." It's the flagship project of the life science. It's being done by work study students who aren't even from the sciences. That's when I realized, okay, look, anybody can do this. They really have. They've kitted everything. So many of these processes are very simple. And all we have to think of is the right question to ask it, right? That it doesn't have to be the one, as I've been saying, that it was initially designed for. Now, when you start doing that, when you start messing with things that have high profitability, when you start messing with materials that there's a great stake in keeping them out of the public sphere, you're going to get some pushback, right? Again, that's a behavior that, particularly during the Bush administration, not acceptable, right? Now, I know there are a lot of people in this room that remember the day when you were supposed to want to do science and have a chemistry set and a geography set, right? That was your astronomy set. I mean, I did it. I grew up with that as a kid. My parents were insisting that I have such things. Whereas now, it's like, ooh, you shouldn't be messing with those materials, right? They've really become changed because, and this is, part of neoconservative philosophy, that the dumber we stay, the better off for them. And that it's best to just say, these things need to be in the hands of experts and specialists, and everybody else keep out. And that's very unfortunate because it's going to be pretty much impossible to have any kind of democratic policy regarding the application of life science knowledge to what technologies if we don't know anything about it, which is, of course, the plan, right? Keep it out of our hands, to keep us as known as possible, and for us to just say, well, it's rocket science, I don't know. Let them make the decisions, right? It's a really interesting way to give up agency. And so if you come at these materials, particularly with some kind of critical perspective, right? I mean, it's instant disciplinary combustion, right? And I don't care how careful you are, how legal you're going to do it, there's going to be some kind of pushback on it. Okay. Now here's one. This was the project that really got us in big trouble. This is the one that the Joint Terrorism Task Force came to visit, and we were going around recreating experiments in germ warfare from the 1950s and early 60s, and we were using simulants. We were using perfectly safe bacteria. We weren't using the dangerous kind. But other than that, we were pretty accurate in how we created these things. And needless to say, this was not liked. Our point in doing was just to show how absurd these experiments were. I mean, they were bloody crazy. And that's our tax dollars. And the reason we were doing it then was because Bush, who never met a weapon he didn't like, reinstated the germ warfare program here, right? I mean, this is how far it's come. Because remember, I don't know if you know who unplugged it, but it was Nixon that signed the treaty saying, all right, we're done with that, right? But yeah, Bush was like, I don't, you know, because Bush also never met a treaty he liked. But it's also, well, we're going to forget about that. Because, you know, and again, they use very tricky legalistic of, you know, that they're only going to do a defensive program, even though it's long been understood that a defensive and offensive program don't apply to this style of warfare. So we just wanted to show, you know, this is the kind of dumb stuff that they're going to be doing. So we were doing it, and it was working great. We did some in Scotland and England and the U.S. But then we got to Germany, and Germany never did any experiments, right? Because Hitler didn't like germs. He was scared of them. And he was a rocket guy. He was a rocket guy, right? That's what he liked doing. And so he gave orders a couple of times. I mean, written proclamations. There will be no germ warfare in the Nazi army. So, and then after they lost the war, they couldn't have germ warfare then. So there was never any experiments done. So we kind of had to make a hybrid one that was specialized for that. You know, we couldn't really recreate one, but we could do an experiment anyway. And what we thought we would do is to see if we could, because this was done in San Francisco, to see if from a mile away we could hit a target with germs, right? With bacteria in this case, as we're driving around, this is in Leipzig, we're driving around, and you know, it's this kind of sleepy East German town, a lot of, you know, it's definitely gone through its hard times and such like. And we go by this one building, and it's like fenced off, and there's barbed wire, and there's armed guards, and I was like, what is that building? It's like, it's the American consulate. Of course it is. Of course it is. We go, okay, well, we have our target. Yeah. So then it's like, well, we just need a good place to launch the operation from, and we can kind of redo this San Francisco test that was done on an unsuspecting public. So we started making, you know, the first thing you always have to do is to have lots of bacteria, but then we had to assemble our human guinea pig core. And this also was based on actual historical fact. In the 50s, they weren't called the human guinea pig core, but that's what they were. These unfortunate group of Seventh-day Adventists who were pacifists, and you know, they were conscientious objectors, but they wanted the government to know that, you know, they were real Americans and they were willing to die for America if they had to. They would put themselves in harm's way. And at that time, they were looking for human volunteers for these warfare studies. And so they were like, well, we have a job for you. And sure enough, these were Seventh-day, I mean, the films are, if you ever get to see them, I mean, they're just unbelievable. It's like, you know, they've got like a dog and a monkey in this cage, and then the Seventh-day Adventist sits in a lawn chair out on the launch range. And boom, you know, they throw over a giant plague bomb over them, see who gets sick. And so we thought, okay, well, we can do it that way too. We'll use live human sensors as a way to see if we could actually deliver our bacterial payload or not. Remember, it's completely safe. That there's not, you know, that the bacteria we were using was a soil bacteria that it's on us all the time anyway. So it's really not something to be afraid of. And do remember too that 99% of the bacteria we have a perfectly healthy relationship with, and happily we've evolved in a way to coexist with bacteria, because if it didn't, we would all be dead, because it is the basis of every ecosystem that there is, right? There would be no rotting or putrefaction. Everything would be like plastic if it wasn't for bacteria. So for the most part, we get along with it. There's just some, you know, that, like plague, that are not necessarily good for us. I mean, we stay away from those. We never mess with that. So we got our volunteers. They were great. And we had a parade. Because, you know, if you're going to march on the embassy, they don't really march. And we had to have a band, and the band was fantastic. They were. you know, they were from this little East German town. I don't even, it's like a crossroads where it still was basically communist. The high school was Ho Chi Minh High. and so, you know, we went, and these guys basically very communist, you know, they had their problems, but basically communist sympathizers. And we said, we need someone to play fascist songs for us. and they said, well, we know them. How do you guys know? We said, well, back in the old communist days, we just had to call them by their number. We just couldn't call them by a title. So it's like, plan number 3. So, yeah, I mean, these guys are characters. So they were like, so what do you want us to play fascist songs for? I said, well, we're marching on the American embassy. They went, we're in. Okay, so they were really, I mean, the one guy who was, this is definitely a sidetrack, but I have to tell it because it was so funny. The one guy who was the baritone player, they're going, and Hans over there, he was a fascist. Hans, you were a fascist? Why didn't the communists kill you when they came? Hans looks and he thinks about it for a moment. He said, well, regimes come and regimes go. But I drive a tank. I always had a job. All right. Okay. Anyway, so off we go. We're marching away, and we get the. Where did we? All right. Oh, they were spraying. Ah, there. We get there, and surround the palace, as it were. And you can see we launch off our little German concoction using smoke, which is what they often use to get the aerial direction. And then, well, that's in front of the Supreme Court there. And so they lined them up and then took swabs off them to see if our bacteria had made it. And then would check for that. Okay, now, the interesting part in all of this, and kind of to address our topic today, was this is where we launched from, which is the City Hall. And so, you know, we drove by that building. I was like, that tower is perfect. That's exactly where we need to go. So, and the curator says, well, okay. I was like, so we're going to go in there and we're going to say, all right, you got to give us the keys to the tower because we're doing this on Saturday when you're closed. It's going to be a bunch of guys. We're going to have some equipment. We're going to need you to run some power up there for us, and we'll lock up. All right, now, see, this is the problem. This is the fact of why do we find that so funny, right? Why do we find that so funny? And this is, you know, this is us being our own managers. Because that's the first thing I thought. I was like, you gotta be kidding. We are gonna go in, march up to security, and say, let us use the tower, can we have the key? And we did. We pretty much did exactly what I said. I said that, you know, we're doing art. And we need to use the tower. There's going to be a bunch of guys, and we need to run some power up there. You might see some smoke coming off it. Just ignore that. and they went, okay. So, you know, again, this is why we find this hilarious. And, you know, this is totally the security statement. Because we cannot possibly understand how that could happen. Right. Given here that, you know, if you did that here, walked into the Empire State, you should use the observation deck. What, you have to make a phone call to someone now? You know, it'd be immediately FBI, I got something for you. Right? That's the difference. I mean, you know, the cultural difference in this. And that's how much we've absorbed it, no matter how critical or how radical we try to be. And, you know, I'm here to say I'm as guilty as anyone, because I was almost ready to destroy my own project without even trying it. Right? I was ready to go. This is impossible. We can't go into that's crazy talk. But yeah, no worries. They hand the key right over. Then I was like, you know, we need someone to, you know, to test the Petri dishes to see if indeed, you know, we got a hit or not, which we didn't. We never get it. This is why germ warfare is so stupid. It doesn't even function well, you know. But it's like we have to test it out to see if we get a hit. They're like, okay, we'll just call the Institute for Microbiology. I mean, this woman's never seen me before. I knock on her door, say, "Can you test these?" And she's like, "Yeah." I mean, would you take? You know, I'm knocking on her. You know, probably not. But like I said, this is like such a, when you get out of the bloody security state, it's just such a different set of consciousness, right? Where it's like people are, you cooperate with them, you help on things, you ask what it's about, but you know, it's not something that you immediately take, what's the worst case scenario that this could be, and then act on that. So yeah, it was, you know, it was really kind of a reconfiguration of just how one manages themselves and these changes. But you do stuff, and you know, and part of the reason, and rightly so, because eventually I did end up being arrested by the Joint Terrorism Task Force for doing this. The Americans did not take kindly to it. And also we were writing a book against germ warfare at the time. They didn't like that either. And they really didn't like our book on contestational biology. That was all, you know, in the legal documents against me. And we even wonder to this day that the hypothesis has been pitched, we'll never know for sure. That's part of the reason I was charged with mail fraud. It wasn't really to convict me of mail fraud, it was to be able to get me on the stand, to ask me under oath what I meant by these books. You know, what I meant by what I had written, right? And why we were doing what we were doing. We know they were thinking of doing that for sure. An investigation by Salon.com that should be coming out has pretty much uncovered that and has that in writing from the prosecutor. So we know they were definitely thinking of that. So again, as you know, even writing books, right? You don't even have to be behaving bad. Just writing books now is now apparently a jailable offense. And it was too, you know, my publisher, Autonomy Media, they were subpoenaed. They were subpoenaed, they did non-compliance, but they were subpoenaed to give the names of everyone they knew who had bought my books. Yeah, and this is the guy that, just so all of you know, who Schumer has picked to be the new U.S. Attorney for Western New York. So if you want to write Schumer a letter, this would be a good time to do it. Because yeah, get ready. The fanatic is now is getting a promotion. So something to think about there. So, you know, this is kind of like to throw it open for questions now, and you know, I pretty much answer anything. I've long given up the idea of having any kind of privacy or anything like that. So if there's anything you want to know, well, you have to. You have to. It's the only way you can defend yourself, really. You know, if you get in a protracted court battle. So if there's anything you want to know, or certain things you want me to address, or just whatever you want to talk about, we have like 15 minutes, and probably it's best if I don't use the whole time.
A quick 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the collaborative piece that you did with the FBI and the Joint Terrorism Task Force that was displayed at Whole Worlds.
Oh, seized. Yeah. We did that, and we did it with Creative Time for the Democracy show, too. I wish I didn't bring, yeah, I don't think I brought those photos are online yet, I'm sorry to say. And Ed, where are the catalogs?
We're out of those catalogs.
Yeah, they were popular catalogs, so they're all gone. But basically what the show was to show all the projects, all the things that the FBI took, including all our Monsanto seeds. I can't believe they took all those, but they did. You know, to show all the things that were taken, and then everything they left behind, because they left my place just trashed. And so it was all the trash that they left, all their experimental kits, all of their little hazmat suits that they left laying around. And yeah, and so we just
Pizza boxes, exactly like the ones out there. Pizza boxes.
But we'll get that up online pretty soon that you can see it, you know, and we have to thank Ed and Hallwalls for supporting us. Because originally we thought we were doing that exhibition as a way to show the evidence to basically everyone in Western New York who wanted to come and have a look for themselves while I was at trial. Fortunately, though, it got dismissed, and we got to have it more or less as kind of a postscript or something, rather than the original function we had envisioned and thought why we really needed it.
What was the arrest like?
What was the arrest like? It wasn't as bad, other than the timing. It wasn't as bad as you might think it would be, because they did recognize me as a citizen, so that helped. So what happens was I was legally arrested, but I was put in detention, right? Which you're not supposed. There's no such thing as detention, but that's where I was. And they caught me as I was leaving the house to go make arrangements for my wife's funeral. Right? So they caught me coming out of the house. They come screaming up in cars. And you go, "You speak Kurtz?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "We're going to need to search you." I was like, "Yeah?" Yeah, there wasn't any reading of rights or anything like that. And so, I asked them, I was like, "Look, you're not charging me. I'm not under arrest, yet you're not letting me leave." And they said, "That's right." And they said, "Well, what is this?" And he said, "Well, you're in detention." And they held me for 22 hours. I mean, they were nice about it. They got me a room at the Hyatt. I didn't have to wait. They couldn't bring me to jail because I wasn't under arrest. So they got me a room at the Hyatt, bought me a steak for dinner. It wasn't autonomous. And they were like, "I gotta stop at the beer store." Stop at the beer store. So it got pretty funny. I was like, "So pretty much whatever I request you will do?" They were like, "Yeah." I was like, "Let's go to the strip club." And he said, "Really?" I was like, "No." But I was just curious if they were really going to do that or not. So that was my arrest. So the next day, that's when it started getting scary. It was like fun time was over. And they got me up and that's when the Joint Terrorism Task Force was waiting for me in the room across the hall. And they brought me in there, and I knew it was going to be a bad day because I looked down at the lead investigator. He's reading the Bible. It's a bad sign. It's a bad sign indeed. For this particular thing. I started talking to this guy, and I was like, "Look, you're the head of the biological division of the Joint Terrorism Task Force. You can look at that equipment. You know it doesn't do anything." He's like, "Whoa. I don't know anything about equipment or life science." I'm like, "You're the head of the biological division? You don't know anything about the life science?" "No." Perfect Bush appointee, Anyway, as that started, I started getting scared because, it was starting to get pretty McCarthy-like in there. And they're like, "We're going to bring you down to the FBI headquarters now for interrogation." I was like, "This sounds really bad." So I called my friends from the Yes-Men because I knew they had just had some legal trouble. I was like, "I think I need a lawyer really bad." He's like, "I'm on it." So Mike starts calling around. He called thank you, ACLU, wherever you are out there. Called ACLU, and they said, "This is the guy you need to get." So they called Paul Cambria, who was the right guy to get. And Cambria calls me in the FBI station. And I say, "Yes, I need a lawyer." He goes, "Okay, well, come over to my office." I said, "I can't. They're holding me in detention." He's like, "What the hell is detention?" I was like, "I don't know, but I'm in it." He goes, "Let me talk to whoever's in charge." He's like, "It's for you." Agent walks off with my phone. He comes back about 5 minutes later. "This way to the exit, sir. Bye."
Oh, that's it.
Yeah, that was it. And then a month later, I was invited to Mail Club. So that was what the arrest was like.
A month later, what?
I was invited for Mail Club.
And facing how many years?
20. 4 counts.
What do you do in mail fraud? You mail?
Yeah. Well, that's what it is. The mail fraud is supposed to be that you somehow trick someone out of their money or property using the mail as a means to do it.
I see.
So in my case, this was why my case was such a precedent-setting case. They wanted to say that because in this package of bacteria that one of my collaborators, a scientist at the University of Pittsburgh, Bob Ferrell, had sent me, and in it there was a thing called material transfer agreement. This is Xerox that says, you promise when you open this not to transfer the material to someone else. Right, and it's basically about indemnity. It's not really about guarding the product so much. And later, my lawyers, just tore into this contract that, is basically them just protecting themselves from liability. But the Department of Justice wanted to say that since that it had been transferred, we had conspired to break this contract, and that was a crime of mail fraud.
Wow.
Which is, of course, completely ridiculous. I mean, that's why the judge threw it out. Because, that's not a crime to do that. I mean, they could maybe sue us, which they declined to do, TCC, the company that supplied it. But to call it a crime is insane. I mean, it's along the lines of saying, I bought a coffee grinder, and in the instructions it said, anyone who buys this can only grind coffee, you can't grind spices, but I'm going to grind spices in it. And then you mail in the warranty card, that would be mail fraud, it would be 20 years. Right? I mean, it was just really crazy. And that's why everyone went insane to trying to fight this thing, because, the US government was basically trying to argue that contract dispute could be construed as mail fraud. And basically, who hasn't had a contract problem in their life, ever? That means they can arrest anyone for a major felony whenever they want. And that's, and that's what the real legal struggle in my case was about.
Steve, the media coverage about your arrest and everything pretty much seems to be one-sided against you. Do you feel that way, or do you feel?
Yes, well, it was because, but that was only in the first week. In the first week or so, that was definitely the case. I didn't have a media team ready. But once I got my media team together, and, I had a really good one led by the Yes Men, after that, we never looked back. The FBI just refused to talk about the case, as did the Department of Justice. We totally shut them down. The coverage was overwhelmingly in our favor from that point on. So yeah, the first week I got hammered pretty bad. I was a terrorist. Yeah. Except for Keith Oldman. He stood up for me.
So where are you going with the computational biology project now? Where are you with Critical Arts Ensemble? Are you continuing with that?
Well, we've tried a number of different things, in terms of food testing and making home kits to see if there's GMOs. And yeah, we definitely have continued along, just trying to demonstrate different ways that we can bring these materials and understandings and processes over to work in another way, right? To have a different kind of politics. I don't know if we're going to do any more at this point. Right now, because, we got so sidetracked into anti-war activities for obvious reasons. And unfortunately, it looks like we're going to have to continue with them. I had my fingers crossed for a little bit there, but I don't think so. So, right now, we're working on radiation and pushing the myths and the science apart, trying to separate those two things out. And because what's concerned us is how the idea of the dirty bomb, kind of something out of Ashcroft's imagination, has really been abused as a fear mechanism. Right? If you understand RDDs, what they claim they can do is just not really true, and it's certainly not a weapon of mass destruction. So we're trying to figure out how we can do a project that will have a pedagogical effect of, we said, separating out the myth, because most people know very little about what radiation is, how it functions, and so on. And what they do know about it is all the most scary things, is atom bombs and Godzilla, and this incredibly rich Cold War mythology of what happens when there's radiation, which, in the case of atom bombs, it's pretty bloody bad. But in the case of radiation in everyday life, which is used everywhere, in medical applications, industrial applications, I mean, it's all around us all the time. It's a bit of a different story. And Yeah, so we're kind of doing that, because even Obama has talked about, you know, we have to beware of the dirty bomb. It's one of the greatest threats against us. It's not. It's just not. And, you know, it's another one of these things that has to stop. Just like germ warfare and the fakery we got out of that, you know, to expose how many lies we were told in regard to what germ warfare is capable of doing. You know, that it's a weapon of mass destruction. Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous if anyone knows the bookstore correctly. So, yeah, that's kind of where we are at this particular point.
Just very quick follow up on that. Do you know any other groups that are, in a sense, have taken up that invitation to work on the reappropriation of biotech?
Well, one thing that we were always calling for was for public labs, and actually MIT, a group at MIT has decided to do that the time has come. So, you know, that's something I think there, but no, it's one of these things that's being approached very cautiously, and even more cautiously, because I can remember back, you know, in the early 90s, we were very vocal about, look what we could do with computers if we just think about this. And a lot of the activist community was not very receptive to that at first. Now it's like a given, right? And it's, you know, it's one of these things that it's going to be even harder with the life sciences, right? Because like I said, because for the most part, we are so alienated from them, you know, that the productive part of the life sciences is so out of our everyday life activities. And that's what we have to work on changing that. You know, there's a lot of demystification of that.
Do you ever worry about going too far with your experiments?
No. I mean, I worry about getting in trouble, but I don't worry about going too far with the experiments because we're not going anywhere that's dangerous. You know, we're very conscientious and we work with other scientists. You know, in anything we do, even like we have scientists that work with us. We always go and check, and we check with the safety people just in case we are doing something that we're unaware of, you know, which that could happen. I could see us doing something stupid, but no, we put enough fail-safes into the program that if we are wandering into a territory where there could be some kind of trouble, that, you know, we're able to do it immediately. And yeah, that's not what we're wanting to do. We're not interested in like kind of, you know, these extreme synthetic biology people that, you know, I want to build a better organism. You know, we have no real interest in that kind of thing, you know, or art is organism building. That kind of dominion is not so much of interest to us. You know, we're very much about solving very practical problems and using whatever material that's at hand to let us do that. You know.
We have time for one last question.
One last one.
But the people stick around.
Sure. I'll answer more out of the pizza box.
In the period of time that you've been doing this work, I would be interested in knowing what would you observe as either, you know, some of the changes in terms of what you knew and learned, or your assumptions about society, art, and whatever, politics at the beginning and today. And how long have you been doing this, I guess?
Well, over 20 years. You know, I've been doing interventions in various technical media work. You know, I don't know how much in terms of our basic assumptions have changed that much, right? I mean, we started with the idea that capitalism inherently has authoritarian blowback. And we still believe that. And, you know, and we still are trying to disrupt or subvert or stop these cultural tendencies. What's changed over the years is the tools we have, right? And because there's been considerable changes in information and communication technologies and in biotechnologies. So it's just now we have way more stuff. And we can make things, you know, we can make things bigger, and we can use, we can have a different economy of scale in regard to what we did. And that, you know, that's what's changed, is this kind of always adjusting to the new tools and then figuring out, once on a rise on the scene, how can we use this? But in terms of the philosophy that's motivated us, I think it stayed pretty solid. You know, that which we hated back then, we still do. And it only gets reinforced because it's only gotten worse. you know, I start feeling nostalgic for Reagan. When at the time, you know, at the time I was thinking nothing can be worse than this. This is, you know, and now I was like, oh, was I wrong there? You know? I had no idea what was coming. Late 9/11, when that came along, it totally screwed that movement here in the United States. Because we're going, Jesus, we have to sit here and save our Constitution and try and get us out of this war. You know, screw globalization. We have too many problems here now. And, you know, you just saw what was, you know, the beginning of a coalescence objectified in Seattle, just thin air, right in the thin air. And, you know, now hopefully maybe we can start rebuilding those coalitions. Well, thank you for coming.